Robin Trey, Beats by.
Wow, hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. How you guys doing today? Uh, Thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. Just wanted to go ahead and get through some books again that we have there stored up that I'm like, oh, I gotta get to this book. I gotta get to this book, and I never really do. So, let's get to some of these books. Even if we do it live and we read it together. Shout out to the music producers. All right. Today's music will be provided by Robin Dre Beats with Bites and Ocelo 12. Ocelome 12. All right. Uh, that's what you'll be hearing in the background. Thanks for the beats. That first one was from Robin Dre Beats with Bite. All right. 1 second. So before we begin, right, this is part 6 today. If you guys are new to my channel, we've gone over some pretty good information regarding the ancient sports of America. We went all the way back to the creation of the origin, actually, of ball games and rubber making in America, right? That started here, rubber trees and all that. That was from here before they spread to the rest of the world. We brought that art, of making rubber all over the world. Every rubber you see started here. All right. So check out the playlist. I have the playlist created. It's called Ancient Sports of America playlist. And pretty interesting. Showing you where the creation of rubber. If you guys don't remember, so what happens when you have a rubber You end up creating balls, right? You end up creating balls, and then you ended up creating ball courts. You end up creating sports. Yeah, so we had ancient ball games here, ancient ball courts with rubber balls, with hoops, real like just like football games, you know, basketball games, soccer games, all that. Not just what they try to show us. We read a lot. We showed the different forms, again the rubber making and the different balls they have found. How special it was to the ancient Mayas and everything. That's how they settled disputes and everything. So imagine like these athletes were like literally, like the gods. They got treated like the gods, especially if they were probably talented, very skillful. Imagine. So everything was on the line in these games. So imagine you're an extra hero winning the game. You're like Superman. So like the people's like word, like the whole city, the whole town. You just avoided war. So sports was very important in ancient cultures of America. And we've shown, in part one, part two, as it says, the origin of ball courts, who had the first ball courts and everything. They were playing, things like this, throwing the balls through hoops, just like we do today. So we went over it. We went over a lot of good information, all the way back to the so-called Olmec, you know, having these ball courts and everything. And you can see the pictures of the Maya murals that I've shown in color, showing ball players and ball courts. Again, uh, part three, the oldest ball court, proven to be right there, and part of the Olmec. Part four, we're talking about a lacrosse racket, ball game origins, the Hero Twins, Spider Woman. A lot of good information on that video, and that book we're gonna get back into as well, that we're reading on there. Part five, we went over, the origin of hockey or shinny, puripecha, chueca, palin, black teams. All right, black hockey teams. Did you guys know that hockey was first made popular by so-called black teams in Canada and all over the Northeast and everything, the U.S.? So we got a whole history. We break that down. All right. So really good video, actually. This is a good video. All right, hockey again, created by the Americans, Indians. And then we got a little bonus video here as well, talking about the history of the black hockey teams and how they made everything actually, they made the sport actually popular. They were beating all the so-called white teams, and they actually dominated. They started getting recruited into the National League, and so I guess that league went, dissolved itself. But yeah, they were really good at it. And last thing we knew, it was the Indians practicing that. So are these really so-called Africans? So you gotta dodge the hijack, very important. And again, today we're gonna go over another book. I want to remind everybody that a lot of people ask me, so, you got this on a playlist. I was like, yes, I do. So make sure if you looking for my playlist, you go to the home page, right? As you see here, Henry Gates over here laughing at everybody, talking about, what do you mean you believe on spitting in a tube? What are you, crazy? All right, so if you see the little tabs here, there's a playlist tab. You click on that, and you get all my playlists. And as you can see, Don't Mention the Chasers is there. All the parts, False Chronology, Unsung Heroes, The Maya Vases, Shadow of Atlantis, the book we've been reading, Secret Cities of Ancient South America, The Real Slave Trade. All right, The Real Slave Trade, for all you guys still doubting that. Check it out. Origin of Animals in America, Forbidding Archaeology. All right, Let Me Be a Free Man. These are all playlists I'm naming out. Amazing All Newspaper Reports of America that they don't want you to see. Washita, Moors, Factual History. That's a really good one. 5 or 6 parts of that. History or Myth. All right, The Black Agents, Original Nations of Asia. All right, a little bit of my footage, me around the country. Some music vibes, right? Some of my music I put up. Gospel According to Piso. The Gospels According to Piso, great series. And genealogical stories, where we do a lot of genealogy. The European coat of arms, the ancient Arlen videos, the real cause of the Civil War, and so on, guys. Like, I have a lot of playlists. Make sure if you're finding you find it hard to find certain videos, maybe it's easier through the playlist, or just go all the way back into my videos tab, click on videos and go all the way down, scroll down all the way, go back at least 3 to 4 years and just work your way up. You won't regret it, I promise you. You learn a lot and you'll see the whole journey we've been on. All right, so again, today we're doing part 6 of this playlist. I haven't done a video. I've been wanting to get back into this, and it's pretty amazing how this history is not really told correctly. When you start looking up the creation of ancient basketball, I'm sorry, or not just ancient, but basketball, football, soccer, they add the hijack. They put it all in Europe, and if they do talk about ancient times, they talk about, oh, the ancient Egyptians had this form, or the ancient Greeks had this form. They don't mention America at all. They don't mention the American Indians at all, the contributions. When most of these sports were invented here, were first played here, created here. We use sports to settle disputes. Sports was big in the Americas and ancient Americas. It's in the blood. Yeah, it's in the blood. That's why you see it still today. It's in the blood. All right. So we're gonna get into this book, The Indians of the Southeastern United States by John R. Swanton. Okay, classics of Smithsonian Anthropology. All right, classics of Smithsonian Anthropology. Let me know if the music's ever too loud. All right, so a lot of people says, well, why are you trying to blackwash though everything, even though you're trying to teach history? Before we read about the games the Southeast Indians played, all right, we're gonna go ahead and just read a couple of descriptions of some of these Southeast Indians. I got a couple videos coming on the Southeast. Just want to show how many tribes were there, how many different nations. Yeah, even though there was a majority of, like 5 civilized tribes, there was many other nations there that weren't from the same families of the 5 civilized tribes. There was southern Siouan, Algonquin, eastern Siouans and Algonquins all spread out through there as well, and different people, right, not related to the 5 civilized tribes. So either way, we're just gonna go ahead and get some of these descriptions. All right, real quick. Where were we? All right, we live, so I'm just gonna pick up belly flop right here because I just saw something cool. So it says, the males of the Cherokees, Muskogees, Seminoles, Chickasaws, Choctaws, and Confederate tribes of the Creeks are tall, erect, and moderately robust, their limbs well shaped, so as generally to form a perfect human figure, their features regular and countenance open, dignified and placid, yet the forehead and brow so formed as to strike you instantly with heroism and bravery, the eye though rather small yet active and full of fire, the iris always black, and the nose commonly inclining to the aquiline. Their countenance and actions exhibit an air of magnanimity, superiority, and independence. Their complexion of a reddish brown or copper colored tribes of America. All right, reddish brown, copper color. Their hair long, lank, and coarse, and black as raven, and reflecting the light luster at different exposures to the light. The women of the Cherokees are tall, slender, erect, and of a delicate frame, their features formed with perfect symmetry, their countenance cheerful and friendly, and they move with a becoming grace and dignity. All right, and let me see. Okay. So let me see. The Muskogee women, oh, though remarkably short of stature, are well formed, their visage round, features regular and beautiful, the brow high and arched, the eye large, black, and languishing, expressive of modesty, diffidence, and bashfulness. These charms are their defensive and offensive weapons, and they know very well how to play them off. And on the cover of these alluring graces are concealed the most subtle artifice. They are, however, loving and affectionate. They are, I believe, the smallest race of women yet known, seldom above 5 feet high, and I believe the greater number never arrived to that stature. Their hands and feet not larger than those of Europeans of 9 or 10 years of age, Yet the men are of a gigantic stature, a full size larger than the Europeans, many of them above 6 feet, and few under that or 5 feet 8 or 10 inches. Their complexion much darker than any of the tribes to the north of them that I have seen. This description will, I believe, comprehend the Muskogees, their Confederates, the Choctaws, and I believe the Chickasaws, though I have never seen their women, expecting, however, some bands of the Seminoles, Uchis, and Savanukas, who are rather taller and slender, and their complexion brighter. The Cherokees are yet taller and more robust than the Muskogees, and by far the largest race of men. I have seen their complexions brighter and somewhat of the olive cast, especially the adults, and some of their young women as nearly as fair and blooming as European women. A more succinct statement is contained in this paper on the Creek and Cherokee Indians. All right, so the Creeks, right? Let's get to this part. It says the Muskogees are in stature nearly equal to the Cherokees, have fine features, and are very way handsome men, and every way handsome men. Their noses are very often aquiline. They are well limbed, countenances upright, and their eyes brisk and fiery. But their complexions are of a dark copper color. All right, dark copper color. All right. So what is that? Is that so if I show a dark copper colored Indian on the thumbnail, am I blackwashing, as people say, when they're being described this way? Complexions are of a dark copper color. All right. Let's see if we just get to the. Let me see. I think I already had it. There we go. It says, coming down to the Seminole Indians of Florida as observed by Macaulay 50 years ago, it is interesting to note the repetition of some comments made by much earlier writers, such as that referring to the small stature of the Creek women. Now it says, physically, both men and women are remarkable. The men, as a rule, attract attention by their height, fullness and symmetry of development, and the regularity and agreeableness of their features. In muscular power and constitutional ability to endure, they excel. While these qualities distinguish, with a few exceptions, the men of the whole tribe, they are particularly characteristic of the two most widely spread of the families of which the tribe is composed. These are the Tiger and the Otter clans, which part of their lines of descent have been preserved through a long and tragic past with exceptional freedom from admixture with degrading blood. Today, their men might be taken as types of physical excellence. The physique of every tiger warrior, uh, I met, I met with furnished proof of this statement. The tigers are of dark, copper-colored fellows, over 6 feet in height, with limbs in good proportion. Dark copper, guys, okay? A specific copper, right? Because many shades of copper, but they tell you dark copper colored, colored, colored man, free colored, copper colored tribes of America, over 6 feet in height with limbs in good proportion, their hands and feet well shaped and not very large, their stature erect, they're bearing a sign of self-confident power, their movements deliberate, persistent, strong, their heads are large, and their foreheads full and marked. An almost universal characteristic of the tiger's face is the squareness, a widened and protruding under jawbone, giving this effect to it. QF other features. All right, so just want to say, right? They're saying tiger. Are there any tigers in America, guys? You know what they're talking about, right? Jaguars or ocelots or yeah, that's the tiger they're talking about. The Spanish used to call jaguars tigres or tigers. You know, that's what they didn't know their name. They didn't know what they were, so they just called them tigers. All right, let's see if we got another one here. We live, so I appreciate you guys with the patience. Yeah. Let's see. So they over here they're talking about a Muskogee division in which the Mikasuki division, in which to the Muskogee division is to be suspected that the physical differences he attributes to clans belong rather to bands. Let us now hear Lawson's description of the Indians of North Carolina, meaning particularly the Siouan tribes and the Tuscarora. As for their legs and feet, they are generally the handsomest in the world. Their bodies are a little flat, which is occasioned by being laced hard down to a board in the infancy. Their eyes are black or of a dark hazel. All right, dark hazel. The white is marbled with red streaks, which is ever common to those people unless when sprung from a white father or mother. Their color is of a tawny. All right, tawny. melanated, right? Which would not be so dark that did they not dab themselves with bear's oil and a color like burnt cork, or so they still get darker than that, even though they're tawny, they're saying. This has begun in their infancy and continued for a long time, which fills the pores and enables them better to endure the extremity of the weather. All right. Okay, they never walk. Let me see. So that's the description, so you guys can see different shades. Let me see if we got another one. Okay, so yeah, so I got that. So these are the Southeast. This is in the same book that we're reading. You guys can see. All right, and then you know who they talking about. All right, now we're gonna go to a part of this book. Just wanted to be clear, right? The Tigers, huh? Great, they're great. Yeah, Tony the Tiger, the Muskogee, the Tiger Clan. Great. All right, let's see. Where we at? Where we at? There we go. We're gonna go all the way to page 674. We're actually gonna get into this book on some other on another video I got probably coming in a couple days or tomorrow. We're gonna be talking about a lot of the art and industries of the Southeast Indians. A lot of the artifacts they found there, pretty cool stuff, and little bit of the different types of nations that are there in the Southeast. But that's on another video. All right. As you guys, let me just show you. I'm not kidding. This is the thumbnail I created. This is the thumbnail I got ready for it. I was gonna go live yesterday with it and I didn't. It's just like sometimes I'm like, all right, now let me go with this or let me go with that, and then I don't have time. But we are gonna definitely do that. It's gonna be a good one. All right, and back to the book. Again, The Indians of the Southeastern United States by John Reed Swanton from 1979. You know, it's pretty modern, but at least you got a lot of kind of like sources, and you know, it's pretty good though. It says here games. The principal game played in the area under consideration was a variety of that which has been borrowed by whites and a modified form and goes by the name of lacrosse. Lacrosse, however, was adopted from the Algonquin Indians about the Great Lakes, who used but a single stick, whereas the Southern Indians used two sticks. These were similar in general pattern to our lacrosse sticks, each being bent over at one end to form a loop which, with the addition of cross cords, formed a cage in which the ball could be caught and held. The game was between two parties, usually representing distinct moieties, towns, or occasionally tribes. And each had a goal to which it was the object of the side to bring home the ball, all right? We're talking about goals just like in soccer and football, right? Goals at each end where you got to bring the ball. Apparently, it was not a prominent element in the culture of the Algonquin tribes of the seaboard, but Strachey has the following brief reference to it. Now, listen to this. A kind of exercise they have often amongst them, much like that which boys call bandy, the name of a bat with which the ball was struck in English. Except for the Caddo, the game appears to have been played by all the Southern Indians, and it was very likely known to the Caddo, although we have no description of it. We cannot indeed speak with assurance regarding the Florida Indians, nor many smaller groups, for which there is little information of any kind. Even in the case of the Eastern Sioux tribes, our references are confined to Peter Martyr's statement, based on conversation with the Indian Francisco of Chicora, that the latter's people played tennis. All right, tennis. And Lawson's mention of a game with a baton and a ball, like our trap ball. All these games originated here in the Americas, guys. The latter may be intended as a description of the single pole ball game. But if the Spaniard understood his Indian correctly, the southern type of lacrosse must have been known. Football, all right, was more in evidence in the Powhatan country, according to Strachey. Football, what type of football here? It says they have the exercise of football, in which they only foreseeable encounter with the foot, they talk about soccer, to carry the ball on the foot, the one from the other, and spurned yet to the goal with a kind of dexterity and swift footmanship. with great footmanship, all right, which is the honor of uh, white is that WT, but they never strike up one another's heels as we do, and they don't even be kicking each other. They know how to play it. We don't. We be kicking each other. Not a Compton that praiseworthy to purchase a goal by such an advantage. All right, we're talking about some Southeastern Indians with some swift footmanship. All right, that goes into football too. With the swift footmanship, dodging the tackles and all that. From Spellman, it seems that there was a men's and women's football game they used beside football play, which women and young boys do much play at. And so we gone over this in the previous parts how women actually played a lot of sports. They participated. There was mixed gender games, and sometimes it was just for women, but they played and participated a lot in the sports. So again, young boys and women here says they make the goals as ours, only they never fight nor pull one another down. That man play with a little ball, letting it fall out of the hand and striketh it with the top of his foot. And he that can strike the ball furthest wins. That they play for. The common type of ball game was well known to Cherokee, Creeks, Chickasaw, and Choctaw. All right, so Dodge the Haja with the names that the Europeans gave all these people, right? But we know who they're talking about. And of course, to the Seminole. It had an important place in the social and ceremonial life of each of these tribes. The Cherokee sticks were somewhat less than 2 feet in length, and the netting was of twisted squirrel skin or Indian hemp. All right, Indian hemp. The ball was made of deer hide and covered with the skin of the same animal. As known to Mooney's informants, each of the goals was made by driving a pair of sticks into the ground, but an early writer, Reverend George White, describes the goals as 100 yards long and marked out by two parallel lines of poles, the lines being also separated by a distance of 100 feet. Almost like 100 yards, 100 feet, huh? A goal was counted when the ball was driven between the two posts in the former case, or carried, or again, listen to this, guys, football, right? American football, right? North American, or carried, carried across, carried across either line. And the latter, again, how do you score? How do you make a goal? All you got to do is drive the ball between the two posts. You got to carry it. All right. Mooney says that the common number of players on a side was 9 to 12, and that 22 was the most anyone had ever heard of. 22, huh? Don't they do that in football? 22? But White affirms there was 50 on a side. All right, 50. Yo, that's like what? Isn't like defense, offense? There you go. Mooney says that they played for 12 points. Game to 12, boy. Game to 12, boy. There was a vast amount of ceremonial preceding and accompanying of a Cherokee game, all right? They never teach you guys this, huh? They never said, hey, did you know your ancestors played football, American football, soccer, and all that? You guys know if we invent, you guys, your ancestors invented it. They want to say some English invented soccer. And they want to say somebody in Springfield, Mass invented basketball, right? They threw it to a basket. And so, we already know that Dodge the hijack. So we're gonna keep reading. It says for at least 7 days preceding. So this is we've gone over this. This is probably an interesting part. I haven't read this before, so I'm reading it with you guys. We've gone over how it wasn't just like just for fun. They did it ceremonially. These sports games, again, they settled disputes. They had cheerleaders. They had groupies. They had the fans, that would support the home team, the away team, just like today, guys. And these ball courts in Mesoamerica, Maya, they had sports announcers, the echo of the voice. You can stand somewhere and the whole crowd, the whole stadium can hear you. And these Maya ball courts, like it was really, the games were really important to the ancient Americans. So this study is really important, but nobody really mentions it because they don't want you to think, because that will lead you to know like this is the true old world. When we talk about these Olympians, right, and Mount Olympus, these Olympians, right? Were they talking about this mystical land? The gods were playing. So it says here there was a vast amount of ceremonial preceding and accompanying a Cherokee game, so-called Cherokee, right? For at least 7 days preceding and usually for 28, 4 times 7, no player must touch a woman, and a man whose wife was pregnant was not allowed to play. Several doctors were employed by each side. All right, they even had doctors at the sidelines, just like today. Before the game, the players were taken to running water, where certain rites were performed over them, including scratching. The ball dance was held the night before, but the players kept a profound secret lest the magic of the opposite side be exerted against the participants. Guys, literally like almost a pep rally. So we read actually before in the other book of the southeastern Indians ball games, and actually all of in America, a lot of parts of America, they had pep rallies, and they would try to intimidate the other town or the other tribe, trying to make really loud noises and stuff the night before and whatever, or for 7 days straight before the game. This is stuff we've read already. So again, 7 days preceding, right? This is what's going on. So there was a harangue after which 7 women representing the 7 Cherokee clans danced. According to Cherokee myth, a game between the birds and animals was won by the latter through the help of the bat and the flying squirrel. All right, we've gone over this mythology, the full story, which was really interesting folklore that we got right in the previous parts. For that reason, pieces of a bat were tied to the poles on which the rackets were hung before the game and to the rattle. Symbolic objects were also worn on the head and the breechcloth, and paintings were employed which had symbolic meanings. Skins of the players were made slippery with the slippery elm or sassafras. The doctors employed various devices to bewitch the opposing team and increase the strength of their own. The players were raised symbolically to each of the 7 heavens in succession, and the doctors carried on their incantations throughout the game. Before the game began, extensive wagers were made on both sides, betting, okay? All right, bets are up now. Before the game, extensive wagers were made on both sides, all right? This is nothing new under the sun. Been doing that here in the Americas, right? Why you think? Because the history of sports in America goes way back. The, the creation stories based on a ball game, the Maya, the Popol Vuh, with the hero twins. They had to play a ball game to avoid war. Yeah, they did it to avoid war. They did it many times. They settled disputes that way. That's what I'm saying. Imagine the players' fame for settling a dispute. You just won us our life or a conquest. They're like heroes. Like imagine a LeBron or Michael Jordan or whatever back then. So yeah, where were we? So many wagers on both sides. Then an old man advanced at one end of the field, and after a short harangue, threw up the ball so that it would fall in the middle. The game was exceedingly rough, and deliberate efforts were made to put good players out of the game. Rough tackling and all that. Rough. No padding is the difference, though, like rugby, guys. After each goal, the chief of the side, which had made it, threw up the ball to put it in play again. The other chief facing him. White states that it not only counted one to carry the ball across the goal line, all right, carry the ball across the goal line, but as well when the chief opposing, the one who threw it up, made a catch. All right, when you make a catch in tow, before leaving, the defeated party challenged the other to play again. Oh, we're running this back. Run it back. We're running it back. You ain't going out like that. We're running it back. William Bartram has the following description of a ball play dance he witnessed in the Cherokee town of Cowie. The people being assembled and seated in order, and the musicians having taken their station, the ball opens first with a long harangue or oration spoken by an aged chief in commendation of the manly exercise of the ball play, recounting the many and brilliant victories which the town of Cowie had gained over the other towns in the nation. All right, they were the champs. They had the championship for a couple years. This was real. This was really going on before the Europeans came, guys. Not forgetting or neglecting to recite his own exploits, together with those of other aged men now present, coadjutors. in the performance of these athletic games in their youthful days. In their youthful days. This oration was delivered with great spirit and eloquence and was meant to influence the passions of the young men present, excite them to emulation, and inspire them with ambition. All right? You hear what's going on? Just like today. All right? These young little warriors, these athletes today, this prologue being at an end, the musicians began, both vocal and instrumental, when presently a company of girls, hand in hand, dressed in clean white robes and ornamented with beads, bracelets, and profusion of gay ribbons, entering the door, immediately began to sing their responses in a gentle, low, and sweet voice, and formed themselves in a semicircular file or line, in two ranks back to back, facing the spectators and musicians, moving slowly round and round. This continued about a quarter of an hour, when we were surprised by a sudden, very loud and shrill whoop, uttered at once by a company of young fellows, who came in briskly after one another, with rackets or hurls in one hand. These champions likewise were well dressed, painted, and ornamented with moccasins and high waving plumes. All right, and their diadems, they immediately formed themselves in a semicircular rank also, in front of the girls, when these changed their order, and formed a single rank parallel to the men, raising their voices in responses to the tunes of the young champions. The semicircles continually moving around. There was something singular and diverting in their step and motions. All right, you guys picture what they're doing, just like these pep rallies, just like even in the colleges, the teams before the games, and the players doing the dances and all that. Come on, just it's the same thing. That's where they got all that. It's the origin of a lot of that stuff. All right, all right. Where were we? The step, if I can be so termed, was performed after the following manner. First, the motion began at one end of the semicircle, gently rising up and down upon their toes and heels alternately. When the first was up on tiptoe, that next began to raise the heel, and by the time the first rested again on the heel, the second was on tiptoe, thus from one end to the rank to the other, so that some were always up and some down, alternately and regularly, without the least bulk or confusion, and they at the same time, sorry, and the same motion moved on obliquely or sideways, so that the circle performed a double or complex motion in its progression, and at stated times exhibited a grand or universal movement, instantly and unexpectedly, to the spectators, by each rank turning to right and left, taking each other's places. The movements were managed with inconceivable alertness and address, and accompanied with an instantaneous and universal elevation of the voice and shrill whoop. The great or regular creek game was played between two or more towns of opposite town moieties. Practice games within a town were usually between the two clan moieties, though the Yuchi are said to have divided up by placing men with children on one side and men without children on the other. As many as 62 are mentioned on a side in the great games. Right to use men married into the town or sons married out of it was a great subject of discussion, and was determined at the preliminary conferences. After these matters had been settled, and when the day for the game approached, the players of each town and their friends started at such a time as to arrive on the ground the night before the game, advancing as if they were going to war. All right? As if they were going to war, just like the Maori people, right? And a lot of these rugby games. We used to do that too. We just forgotten. They danced 4 times the night before and took medicine. The women dancing first, to be followed by the men, brandishing their ball sticks. Each side employed a medicine man, who brewed and administered the medicines, and scratched all the players, making a parallel scratches on their calves about what's going on here. Okay. Making 4 parallel scratches on their calves about deep enough to draw the blood. He also put medicine on their ball sticks. Next day, a great quantity of property was wagered. All right, a lot of property being wagered. The ball sticks were usually made of hickory, tapered and turned into opposite directions, depending on whether the owner were right-handed or left-handed, and the cage was of deer or raccoon skin tongues. Each hoop was also bent sideways, a hoop, sidewise a little so that the ball could be held in the cage between them. The ball was of deer hair covered with deer hide and sewed with deer sinews. Of each side had the privilege of making the medicine ball, which they could use to make their fourth goal. This had some magical object, like a measuring worm in the center, which the doctor, sitting behind the goal post of his side, was believed able to draw to himself. The players were only their flaps, but with the tail of a fleet or masterful animal behind. They were usually brilliantly painted, however, with designs of a kind likely to bring good luck, though little is remembered regarding this. In games between the clan moieties, crane feathers were worn by the whites and eagle feathers by the Tisilokis. The goals formerly are said to have been as much as a quarter of a mile apart and consisted of two saplings with a space of about 10 feet between them and without a crossbar. But in later years, when there were usually fewer players, they were not more than 150 to 200 yards, all right? 100 yards, 200, 150 yards, okay? From each other, the uprights 3 to 3.5 feet apart and with crossbars placed pretty well up. Bartram speaks of but one pillar, used for a goal at each end, and this was at all events the customary goal among the Choctaw down to modern times. As a hit on the crossbar or the post, no matter from which side thrown, counted as a goal. All you got to do is hit that one pillar or that one stick, or pole that's there. The goal might be thought of as actually a solid object, the space between the uprights and crossbar not having been filled in. Midway of the field, on one side, sat two scorers, one for each party. They usually played for 20 points, sticking in 10 sticks in a row in succession and then pulling them out. The Texas Alabama, however, made marks on opposite sides of a long straight line, the points for one side being on one side of the line and those for the opponents on the other. The balls were thrown up in the middle of the field, the first by the best speaker they could find, who made a few appropriate remarks before putting the ball in play. After a goal was made, the ball was again put in play by one of the two old men, all right? They got referees, umpires, all that, guys, controlling. One from each side who also acted as referees, like I just said. There was a man at each goal to set that the goals were made fairly. They even got sideline, refs, all right? And two or more men of each side to umpire and keep order. They had so many referees in one game, just like modern football. Before starting play, the participants threw down their sticks on opposite sides of a line extending down the center of the ground so that the ends of the opponent's sticks would be opposite and there would be assurance that the number of players on each side was the same. Then each party divided up into 5 squads, one in the middle of the ground, one of each goal, and two halfway. The rules of the games allowed extreme roughness. Limbs were frequently broken. All right, guys? Broken bones here, and lives occasionally sacrificed. Even lives lost, all right? During the entire period of play, the doctors continued their conjurations while you got the medical staff waiting on the sidelines, right? When it was over, the victorious side ran to their ball post and danced about it before leaving the ground, while their friends possessed themselves of the property that had been wagered. All right, show me the money. Show me the money. All right. This guy lost his marbles. All right, get that guy out of here. Yeah. Same name as last time too. Like you if you're gonna create a account, at least be slick enough not put the same name. The game of it says here the game as played by the Chickasaw was practically identical with the Creek game. Adair says that the goals were about 500 yards from each other. Man, each made of two long limber poles, set up 3 yards apart but standing outward. If the ball were thrown over or between these, it counted a point, but if it went under, it counted nothing. He says that after fasting and taking medicine all of the preceding night, the players turned out next morning covered with white paint. He mentions button snake root among the medicines taken by them. The Choctaw game seems to present some minor peculiarities. The great games were between different towns or cantons or cantons, but it is impossible to determine whether the Choctaw anciently had town moieties similar to those of the Creeks. It was usual for the women to play after the men were through, something that seems not to have been customary elsewhere. All right. So again, they try to separate a lot of these tribes, the five civilized tribes, like they were, but anciently they kind of go back to related ancestors, anciently, even if it's a couple generations back. So, of course, they have similar games and a lot of similar things. One of our earliest authorities says that 20 played on a side. Another somewhat later gives 40, and a recent writer saw 30. All right, we've actually seen 100. We know we've read this, and so another said 30, but the missionary Cushman raises the number to from 75 to 100 per side. There you go. And Catlin speaks of several hundred. Yeah, 100 people in one side, guys. Can you imagine? Well, if you got a 500-yard field, and the ball is just, and sometimes, like we read in the last videos, it would take all day for 1 point, and that 1 point will be game. Next point wins because it will be so hard just to get the ball over to that side. Ball going back and forth with so many people. Again, hundreds. The night before the game, each party danced as did the Cherokee and Creeks pep rally. A chief seated himself back of the ball post of his side, but facing it. Two rows of women ranged themselves between him and the post facing each other, and the players themselves formed a circle near the post. The men danced about the post. Then the women danced, and these dances were repeated 12 times according to Halbert, while Catlin merely states that they danced every half hour all night. That night they put on their paint, rubbed their limbs, and took medicines. As in the case of the other tribes, a doctor was employed by each party, but we hear of his activities less in connection with the preliminaries than during the game itself, when each engaged in various conjuring practices, such as throwing the rays of the sun on the players of their sides by means of a mirror to increase their strength. The ball sticks were made of hickory, usually, but Bosu adds chestnut. The lengths given 2.5 to 3 feet would seem to belie assertions that their sticks were shorter than those used by the Creeks. The ball appears to have been identical with the ball of the Creeks in Chickasaw, except that one later or writer mentions rags used in stuffing instead of deer hair. Starr asserts that one party sometimes tied a long tail, a ball, to impede it when their opponents had to throw against the wind, and this must mean that the device of the medicine ball was in force among the Choctaw. Their dress consisted of the usual breechclout and belt with a horsetail or tail of some other animal, the raccoon being the only one mentioned fastened behind, and at times the mane made of horsehair fastened around the neck. They were also brilliantly painted. All right, you guys hear what they're playing with, right? They got horsehair on them and all different stuff, and they also painted. The goals are given by two early writers as about 150 feet apart, but the latter ones all make it between 600 to 1200. Romans 1775, what's that mean? States that the goals were in the shape of St. Andrew's crosses, and that the ball had to be driven between them under the points where they crossed. Wow. In the game Catlin witnessed, there were two posts. That's almost like, sorry, but that's almost like, what they do today. Gotta kick it between the poles, right? It's the only way that it can score a point. Well, instead of the U shape in football, it had the cross shape. So you got to kick it between those two. In the game Catlin witnessed, there were two posts about 25 feet high and 6 feet apart with a crossbar. Later writers, however, all tell us that each goal was made of two flat pieces of board 15 to 20 feet high and lashed side by side as to present a single solid surface. To count as a goal, a ball must go between the post. All right? To count as a goal, it must go between the post when there was space or strike the goal and fall back within the line of the goal post. The central point midway of the goals was indicated by a short stake, and directly opposite this on one side of the ground was a scaffold for the property wagered. This under the charge of a stakeholder. All right, stakeholders. The number of points for which they played evidently varied, and Romans is undoubtedly correct in saying that they agreed, or Romans, they agreed in advance what it was to be. Thus, Bosu mentioned 16 points, Cushman 10 to 20, Albert and Starr 12, and Catlin 100. We are also informed that they sometimes played all day without reaching the number agreed upon. This is what I was saying earlier. When the side which had scored the most points would be adjudged the winner. Again, next point wins. However, Albert stated that a game sometimes lasted 2 days. All right, when you got several hundred people, you can do that. Some people can rest, others can come in. 2 day game, guys. 2 days. Some of the old men superintended the preparations, and Catlin tells us that in the game he witnessed 4 medicine men acted as judges. A medicine man, probably one of these, threw the ball up at the center to start the game, after which the side which made a goal had the privilege of putting the ball in play again. Nothing more is said regarding the officials. There are said to have been 3 principal squads formed by the men on each side, one at either goal, and one in the center, the other players being scattered about. Players could run with the ball held between their sticks or throw it. As among the other tribes, the play was violent and many injuries resulted. The wagers were made on the morning of the game, and all weapons had to be left in the respective encampments. According to one informant, almost one sort of action on the part of the players. Sorry, guys. There we go. Were permitted except butting with the head. You couldn't butt your heads. We've cost the party of the offender 5 goals. That's a penalty, right? Penalties. During the progress of the game, the women ran about serving the men. All right. On of their side with coffee or whipping up those that seemed slothful. All right. Coffee? Ancient coffee? Yeah. Give them energy, huh? Wake you up. Wake up. Basu says that uh, when the women played this game, they used rackets with curved handles. The women's game, of which Halbert speaks, played with sticks and balls like the game of a battledore and shuttlecock, may have been descended from that. Swanton, 1931, page 140 to 151. There was a variety of this game in which only the hands were employed. All right, only the hands, the ball being larger, and it was connected apparently with football. All right, guys, listen. Only the hands are being used here. Thus, among the Creeks, we hear of a game in which the men and women played against one another, the men being oblique to kick the ball, while the women could use both hands and feet. The Chickasaw called this Towak and seems to have played it in the same manner. The games were for 12 points and continued for 4 days, after which a feast was held. All right, so you see, feasts, celebrations, ceremonies, games, it's part of the culture. The Chickasaw also had a game called Acabato, in which they used a ball as big as a baseball propelled along the ground by means of bent sticks. The goal was made of 3-foot posts placed 2 feet apart, and the bent sticks recalled the Choctaw game mentioned by Bosu, except that the latter was played by women against women, whereas in the former men and women were opponents. As in the other, they played for 12 points. Roman tells us of a game played promiscuously by men and women in which they used a ball made of woolen rags which they beat about with their hands. This was perhaps related to the game remembered by the Choctaw of Bayou Lacombe, in which they used merely their hands, and the goals were formed of stakes 10 feet high, a few inches in diameter, and 200 feet apart, though the goals remind us of the regular Choctaw game. This handball game seems to have been the only one of this type known to the Natchez, to the warriors, the Natchez. We have descriptions of it by Dupratz and Dumont de Montigny, and it was played during the great first fruits ceremony. During the first fruit ceremony, first fruits, all right, when you give the first fruits, corresponding to the Creek busk. Dupratz places this in September, but Dumont in July. Presumably, it was played at other times, and indeed Dumont implies as much, but we have no other records. On these two occasions, numbers of men took part, Dumont stating that there were 800 on each side. What? And this would facilitate the carrying out of one great object of the game, which was to prevent the ball from falling to the ground. You hear that? It couldn't touch the ground. So they had so many people on each side. According to Dupras, it must not be retained in the hand of any player, and you couldn't hold it either. You got to keep hitting it. And it, and if one attempted to hold it, it would be instantly snatched from him. Dumont, on the other hand, makes the ultimate victory depend on the retention of the ball by someone. Dupras tells us that the players were divided into two parties under the Great Sun and the Great War Chief, respectively, the heads of the former being decorated with white feathers and those of the latter with red ones. It began about 9 o'clock in the morning, when the two leaders made their appearance and summoned their followers by sounding upon a drum. All right, drum. First, the chiefs threw the ball back and forth for a while until suddenly, all right, they're throwing the ball back and forth to each other. The chiefs, right? They're throwing it back and forth. The chiefs, all right? So again, first the chiefs threw the ball back and forth for a while until suddenly the great sun set, sent it among the massed participants, and the game was on in earnest. The ball was of the size of the fist and consisted of a piece of deer hide stuffed according to Duprat with Spanish moss and according to Dumont with sawdust. Duprat states that the object of each party was to make it touch the cabin of its leader. A single tally ended the game, but it usually lasted 2 hours, and Dumont says it sometimes extended for more than 3 hours. Duprat adds that the chief of the losing side made the winners a considerable present, and the latter were permitted to wear distinguishing plums until the following year or until the next time they played the ball, right? They were champions for a year. The war dance followed this, and afterwards all went to bathe. There is reason to think that the single pole ball game was older than the other, partly because the ground on which this was played constituted one element in each of the old Creek ceremonial areas. All right, come on, hijack. Come on, hijack, refresh. Come on, archive. Give me that book. Give me that book. Hope you guys enjoying. We live. All right, so I had to borrow it again. These are the kind of books that you have to borrow. You can't even download or anything. And to purchase, they're even hard to find. But yeah, they're there all over the place. So let's see, where were we? All right, so it says sometimes it is true the games were not actually played in this ground, but about a second pole outside. Curiously enough, this particular game is almost the only one among the Timucua of which we have any account. We are told that they set up 3, 8, or 9 fathoms high in the midst of an open space, at the top of which was a mat of reeds or bulrushes or a frame of twigs, and that the object of the game was to hit this last with a ball. Apparently, as in the case of the Notches ball game, one tally settled the contest. In 1560, De Luna, colonist mentions ball posts in the squares of the towns they visited. All right, so all these towns all had ball posts or ball courts, from which it would seem that the game was already in existence among the Upper Creeks and the Mobile Indians. The single post ball game among the Creeks was always between the men and women, though sometimes the women's side was reinforced by 2 good male players. The men used their regular ball sticks, the women their hands. Part way up the pole was a mark, and whichever side made a hit upon the pole above this mark scored 1 point. On top there was a wooden image, or in modern times a cow skull or a horse skull, and if a player hit this, his or her side scored an extra number of points, usually 5s. Adair makes mention of this game as known to the old people of the Chickasaw, time out of mind. They used a pole with a bush tied at the top. I find no specific reference to this game among the Choctaw, but they certainly knew it. Probably the most frequently mentioned southeastern game is the one called chunky. There were evidently several different varieties, but all made use a smooth stone roller and 2 long slender poles, often supplied with short cross pieces midway of their length. While there were usually only two active participants, numbers of onlookers wagered quantities of property on the outcome. The essence of the game was to start the roller along a smooth piece of ground, with each every town was supplied, after which the two players threw their poles after it with the idea of hitting the stone, coming as near it as possible when the stone came to rest, or preventing the opponent's stick from accomplishing either of these results. Lederer and Lawson both observed the Enosuans playing chunky in their town. It is not surprising to find the Usabo towns provided with chunk yards, since they belong to the Muskogean stock. There is no mention of the game in Florida, but in this case, on account of the paucity of a material, silence signifies little, and a form of the game is described in 1595 as observed by Brother San Miguel among the Guale Indians. Immediately after the priest and his companions had been escorted to the town of the head chief of the province of Asao, about the present St. Simon's Island, thus they began to entertain us with a certain game, in order to begin which they put all the players together with their chief at one side of the square or plaza, each one with a staff or piece of sharp-pointed horn of the form and shape of a dart, but one of them did not resemble it. The chief held a stone in his hand of the shape and size of 5-cent loaf of bread, una torta de pan de a medio real. That's what they said in Spanish. And to begin the game, he who held it set it rolling with his whole strength, and all at one time and without order threw their staffs after the stone, and at the same time started after them on the run. I did not understand the game very well, but it appeared to me that he who ran fastest and arrived first took his staff and the stone, and without stopping a moment returned to dart it at the place which they had left, and in the same manner the others took theirs and returned to dart them. At this exercise they spent a considerable period of time, and they were so much engaged in running that sweat poured down all over their bodies. All right. Says William Bartram observed chunk yards in the Cherokee country, and Timberlake mentions the game specifically stating that the count was in accordance with the nearness of the ball to marks upon the poles. Adair's description is probably applicable to both the Creeks and Chickasaw, and is the only one that has come down to us from either tribe. He says that not more than one or two played on a side, that the sticks were 8 feet long, and the stone rollers measuring about 2 fingers in breadth and 2 spans around were the property of towns, which preserved them carefully from one generation to another. After the stone and sticks had come to rest, he whose pole lay nearest to the roller scored 1 point, and if it was in a contact with it, and if it was in contact with it too. If both sticks were equally near, neither side scored. The poles were anointed with beer grease. Roman says that the Choctaw used poles 15 feet long, that one threw the stone, his antagonist tried to hit it by throwing his pole after it, and the first player attempting to throw his own in such a way as to intercept the pole of the second. All right, you guys hear what's going on? The winner threw the stone for the next play. Cushman's account is similar to that of Roman's, except that he shortens the poles from 15 feet to 8 to 10, and states that 1 point was scored by the man who hit the stone and one by the man who hit the pole of his antagonist. Halbert tells us that this ancient game, called Achapi, was revived in 1876 and played for the last time by an aged Choctaw named Mehubi and some younger men whom he instructed. From one of these, Halbert learned that the yard was about 100 feet by 12, that the poles were hickory saplings with rounded ends, which had been barked, scraped, and seasoned over the fire. 4 notches were cut near the head, one in the middle, and 2 halfway between the above points. The score depended on nearness of the notches to the roller when they came to rest, and 12 points constituted a game. Dumont de Montigny says that the notches used poles 15 and 16 feet long, that he whose poles lay nearest to the stone won, and that the game was for 10 points. Dupras reduces the length of the poles to 8 feet and adds they were shaped like a capital F. The stone roller was 3 inches in diameter and 1 inch thick. The object was, as stated by Dumont, the winner of each throw having the right to hurl the roller next time. After making a throw, the players kept on running beside their poles, evidently with the thought that they might exert upon them some psychic influence. Both Dumont and Duprat's comment on the amount of property which changed hands during the course of these games. All right, all the bets they made, all the wages, and all the property losses. The Chitimaca and various tribes along the Mississippi River played it, and G.A. Dorsey has recorded a Caddo myth in which it is plainly mentioned, though in this, the plains type of ring appears made out of elm bark. From the description of the game which Gravier witnessed among the Huma, it is possible that instead of throwing two sticks at a stone roller, they threw a stone roller at a wooden one. However, it is more likely that there has been an error in his notes. The Creeks played a game which was possibly descended from the one last described. They pitched arrows in succession, and if the point of one of the player's arrow touched the feather of another's, the second player kept the arrow of the first. The Creeks also had another game distinctly resembling Chunky. This was called Rolling the Stone or Rolling the Bullet, and was played by rolling a large marble or bullet along a trench with the object of making it come to rest in certain hollows which counted differently depending on the difficulty of reaching them. The moccasins game, the moccasin game, usually called by the Creeks hiding the bullet, was played by two sides, each of which in turn strove to conceal a bullet or some similar object so skillfully under one of a number of moccasins, hats, socks, or gloves that the opponent could not guess its location. We have mention of this among the Creeks, Chickasaws, and Choctaw. It seems to have been played by men only, and at least this is specifically stated of the Chickasaw. The four socks or gloves they used were the kind they were accustomed to weave at home. One on each side took turns in doing the hiding. If the bullet was disclosed the first guess, it counted four. If one, the second, two. Cane slivers were employed as counters. Among the Choctaw, the game is said to have been played with six on a side and seven hats under which a small stone or bullet was concealed. The players guessed in turn. This introduces us to stick and dice games. Beverly says of the Virginia Algonquins. They have also one great diversion, to the practicing of which are requested whole handfuls of little sticks or hard straws, which they know how to count as fast as they can cast their eyes upon them, and can handle with a surprising dexterity. We may also quote strategy, dice play, or cards, or lots, they know not, howbeit they use a game upon rushes much like Kurimeo, an ancient English card game, wherein they card and discard and lay a stake too, and so win and lose. They will play at this for their bows and arrows, their copper beads, hatchets, and their leather coats. All right, that's what they're playing for. Lawson describes the same or similar game among the Eastern Siouans and perhaps Tuscarora. The chiefest game in a sort of arithmetic, which is managed by a parcel small, split reeds the thickness of a small bent. These are made very nicely so that they part and are tractable in their hands. They are 51 in number, their length about 7 inches. When they play, they throw part of them to their antagonist. The art is to discover upon sight how many you have and what you throw to him that plays with you. Some are so expert at their numbers that they will tell 10 times together what they throw out of their hands. Although the whole play is carried out with the quickest motion, it is possible to use, yet some are so expert at this game as to win great Indian estates by this play, all right? This is big money. It's not just little sticks being thrown around, guys. All right? Big estates going around at the line here. And, all right? Being lost, being taken. A good set of these reeds fit to play withal are valued and sold for a dress doe skin. Romans observed the Choctaw women playing a game that reminds us strongly of jackstones. The women also have a game where they take a small stick or something else off the ground after having thrown up a small ball, which they are to catch again. Having picked up the other, they are fond of it, but ashamed to be seen at it. Hmm. Sounds like the jacks. When you pick up, you throw the ball, you pick up. Games in which objects like dice were used were of two kinds. One in which the dice were small bits of cane or slivers of wood, the other in which fruits, stones, beans, grains of corn, or similar objects were employed. To one of these types probably belonged the game which Lawson observed among some Congari women. He says, the name or grounds of it I could not learn, though I looked on above 2 hours. Their arithmetic was kept with a heap of Indian grain. The Creek women and occasionally the men played a game in which four sections of cane were used split in half. These were thrown into the air and the count depended on the relative number of convex and concave surfaces presented after they had come to rest. Our anonymous French writer mentions a Choctaw game played with four canes, which was probably identical with this, and Duprat describes at considerable length a related game among the Natchez. The pieces with which they play are three bits of cane, 8 to 9 inches long, split in two equal parts, and pointed at the ends. Each piece is distinguished by designs cut into the convex side. Three play together, and each has her bit. In playing, they hold two of these pieces of cane on the open left hand, and the third in the right hand, the rounded side above, with which they strike on the two others, taking care to touch only the ends. The three pieces fall, and when two of them have the convex side up, the one who has played scores a point. If there is only one, she scores nothing. After the first, the two others play in their turn. They are said not to have used this in gambling. According to Benjamin Paul, Chitimaca women also played a game in which bits of cane were used, and so did the Caddo. Among the Siouans, Lawson noted a game played with dice made of persimmon stones. The Cherokee played a game in which six beans made dark on one side and white on the other were put into a shallow basket, shaken and tossed into the air, the score dependent, of course, upon the number of black or white sides shown when they came to rest. 12 beans were kept as counters, from which it appears that the game was for 12 points. This must have been almost identical with the Creek game, in which grains of corn were used, which had been blackened on one side. According to Cullen, the Choctaw played this with 8 grains of corn, but Bushnell's was told by the Choctaw of Bayou Lacombe that they used 5 or 7. Foot races are noted in some places. In Florida, in the very earliest accounts, and among the Caddo in particular, the Chitimaca are said to have played a game in which a ball was thrown through a ball thrown through a ring, but it is by no means certain that this was pre-Columbian. Ah, yes, it was. We already proved that. You see how he just threw that in there? Nobody was saying nothing, right? But he had to throw that in there because they don't want to make it ancient. They don't want to say, because if they give the credit to the Mayas or pre-Columbian people, they're going to have to admit it was invented here. And the Alabama once had a bearskin marked off into compartments, which reminds one very much of the familiar Marchesi board. The game itself was similar. A considerable number of children's games were an imitation of those of their elders. All right. And it goes into war, which we're going to get into in other parts, which we actually have gone into in my real slave trade video. A lot of the wars, what happened. But that is hold on, guys. Let me get that. That's the end of this segment of the book. All right. Just wanted to go ahead and read that and remind everybody. Hold on, guys. That, what you see today, all these entertainment, all these sports, a lot of it, most of them originated here. And it was a part of the American indigenous culture and life. They practiced it regularly, part of their ceremonies and everything. Their rituals, their feast, the creation story, a lot of mythology involved in ball games. And as you guys heard, all that led to what they created, today, these modern sports games, and now, they make millions off it. And of course, who is usually the ones dominating these things are the indigenous people in the world, dominating these sports, right? And mainly coming out of America, you know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little reading. I want to do, so I got a lot of new people. They're not used to the long videos, so we try to make videos, watchable. This has been at least an hour, so we're pretty good. Again, I got more parts of this and of this stuff in this series, ancient sports from different tribes. All right, just focusing on this region because of this book. I was already researching and I saw and I read a little bit of it and I was like, oh, I got to read this to these guys. And I've been wanting to do one of these parts again. So I thought this picture fit well, whatever. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks. We already read the descriptions too. Deep, dark copper colored, dark copper, dark copper, dark copper. So hold on. So remember, guys, we have a playlist. Just to remind everybody. All right, we have a playlist created for a lot of these videos. So make sure to go to my homepage, click on the playlist, and you'll see different ones. All right. Everybody's been asking me about the chaser one. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, a lot of my videos are on playlists for you guys. All right. And if you want to support, check out. You can support me on my Patreon. Shout out to all the patrons for holding me up. I appreciate it always. Again, thanks for tuning in. Shout out to the music producers for this video. Ocelome 12 and Rob and Dre Beats with Bite. All right. Rob and Dre Beats with Bite. Much love and respect. Hey, you like the freestyle? Hey, man, I be freestyling here and there, I got a lot to say sometimes. But I appreciate you guys. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. Yeah. Pura vida. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Robert Dre, Tracy Black. Robin Dre, trust me, bye.
Yeah, Robin Dre Bees. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Much love. Take care. Wow.